Welcome back into Three Springs Native Nursery. This week we're going to be working on some hardwood cuttings, getting ready for spring. I got all sorts of trays yesterday you might have seen on Facebook, a bunch of deep cell 50 counts as well as some 24 counts, and that's what we'll be working with our deep-rooted cuttings today. A couple updates for the nursery back behind me here in that direction. You can see all of our tables that we've set up so far. We got 5 of them in place, 5 more to go. Building out the infrastructure slowly but surely. At home, I finally got around to getting a heat source inside our greenhouse. So we've been working on about 6 days of germination so far. So I'm looking forward to this next week, all the fun of watching all the different species pop up. It's really getting to be an exciting part of the time of the year. Chances are you have access to some of the hardwood plants we're going to experience today. So come along, learn a thing or two, and you might just pick up the skill yourself. If not, don't worry. Three Springs Native Nursery's got you covered. You can always come and grab some from us if you don't want to take it on yourself. But let's go. So the first one we're going to work with today is our American elderberry, Sambucus canadensis. This is a black elderberry. And as you can see, this one's put on some pretty good growth to it. Survived a lot of deer pressure, but we're going to do a little pruning on it today and end up with a bunch of hardwood cuttings along the way that we can repurpose and start a new elderberry patch with in just a couple months. A major key to success with hardwood cuttings is selecting the right material. When it comes to the hardwood plants that we're using today, we're going to be focusing on this previous year's growth. When you get into growth that's 2 years old, such as this here, you're not going to have success with your hardwood cuttings. So focus in specifically on these elderberries. It's going to be a little more reddish brown, and it just looks a little bit more glaucous, as opposed to when you get to your second year growth, it gets a little bit more papery and then a little bit more gray. Another thing is you'll see water sprouts, or these really aggressively growing sprouts that come from the base of your plant. Here's an example of one. This is a fresh sprout and is a perfect candidate for taking hardwood cuttings from. The thing that makes these such great candidates is they grow with a really strong vigor, and that's going to help them when they go into the rooting process. The one drawback is that your nodes are super spaced out when you get these long whips. So you can take a little combination of both and see what works best for you. That's what I do myself. Okay, so I cut up one of those really big water sprouts, and I'll show you a little bit about how I cut mine. I could have gone with a little sharper pruners, but you know what? I know the elderberries are resilient, so for me, I'm just going to go ahead and cut them. What I'm looking for when I'm taking my cuttings is I'm paying attention to these nodes. You're going to want 2 nodes for each cutting with your elderberries, one for below the surface and then one above the surface. The one that goes below the surface, we're going to cut just straight across on. Let's take that cutting here. So I'm going to cut straight across right below that node. I'm going to come up 1 more node, and then I'm going to give myself maybe 1.5 inches or so, and then I'm going to take a diagonal cut. So now I'm left with the one that's going to sit below the surface of the soil and do its rooting, and the one that'll be above and it'll do its shooting. The angled cut is to help to keep water from dripping down and getting stuck inside there and rotting out. But I also cut this up just a little bit higher because I often notice that from the top, it's going to dry out a little ways. And if that node is too close to where that dry spot ends, you have the potential to kill this node off completely and have that dry out. So just one of those helpful tips that you learn by doing it a handful of times. So again, take it right underneath the node, cut straight across, come up 1 node, give yourself a diagonal about 2 inches up, and there's a perfect stake to create a new bush from. Do it a couple more times. That one maybe was a little close towards the node, but it's not perfect. Nature will find its way. The ones that survive will survive. Now I'm getting down to something a little smaller than a pencil size, so I'm not too worried about that. Even this one's maybe a little bit small. I like to go anywhere between pencil to pinky size. So there's two other quick tips I got for you. One deals with the directionality of the cut. Now when you do your slant up at the top and flat across on the bottom, it helps you understand the direction that your nodes are facing. You always want to plant your nodes facing up. Now, I've accidentally planted it with the nodes facing down. It's worked, but it's a lot of stress on the plant to go through the vertigo process of shooting those sending those shoots out the side and then having them curve upwards. Definitely not great for the structure of the plant long term either. One other key thing to pay attention to when you're taking your cuttings is you might be cutting into fresh New Year's growth. But you'll notice if it's live and worth planting, it has a little bit of a green hue on the outside cambium layer. You can have fresh growth that sounds dead and hollow, doesn't have that green to it. That ain't worth planting. Get rid of it. Okay, so the next hardwood plant that we're going to work with is Ribes americana. It might be hard to see, but there's just a whole mess of little reddish brown shrubs down below me, and those are going to be what produce our beautiful black berries in middle of summer. They're a delicious sweet treat, and the more sun you give your plants, the more they'll produce for you. But watch out, because the deer also like them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a little bit less focused than I was when I was taking my elderberry cuttings. I'm going to work on just trying to gather sections that are anywhere from 6 to 8 inches long that have a handful of nodes above them. Black currants are super easy to propagate. One method that I use often is the stump method. When I have these wet areas, I'll lay down a big branch and then I'll cover it up with dirt and leaves. Come back in a month or two and it will root itself, and all I have to do is cut it into sections and pot it up. But if you want to go through the process and test out your own hardwood cuttings, you don't have to be too delicate about how many nodes you get. Just grab yourself, like I said, 6 to 8 inches, maybe 10 in some cases, stab it in your growing medium, keep it nice and moist, and you'll find success with black currants. Now, one thing about the black currants is you don't have as much mass on your stems. So go ahead and focus on something that's about the size of a pencil shape, but don't get too worried about if your material doesn't seem like it's thick enough. As long as you're getting a part of that main stem, you're going to be just fine to go. So just like that, I got myself a good 15 or 20 cuttings here. I'll end up going and collecting about 50. So catch you on the other side. Here we are with our third shrub of the day that we're working on, and that's going to be pussy willow. Now, pussy willow is one of those that you often see in floral arrangements early spring, right around Easter time. They have the fluffy little tops on them. Those calyxes are some of the very first nectar sources that our queen bees use when they come out of hibernation in early spring. As Douglas Tallamy's work has shown us, salix in our Wisconsin area is actually the #1 native species for hosting different types of Lepidoptera. I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 species. So definitely a powerhouse and well worth having around in your landscape. When it comes to taking our cuttings, we're going to be looking for, again, the fresh growth from this last year. That'll give us our best viability when it comes to creating roots for our new plants. But with most of the willows, it really barely matters. If you have a piece of the plant material, stab it in the ground and it'll find a way to root. For our case, I'm just going to focus in a little bit more on getting some of the newer growth that is big enough. Unlike the ribes or your currants, these stems will be a little bit larger in size, so you can start focusing back in on about the pinky size for these. You'll be able to see the New Year's growth pretty distinctly in the color of the bark. It's going to have a much darker appearance than the 2-year-old growth that's going to be more gray and light in appearance. So that can help you hone in on some of the areas that you're looking to use as cutting material. I'll just bend down some of the tops and take some nice cuttings off of there. The other nice thing about your pussy willows, and most willows in general, is your nodes are much more compact. So you can get a lot more cuttings. So here I'll show you a little example of the willow cuttings. Essentially what I'll do at first is I'll just come in and I'll cut off all my little branches, maybe leaving a node or two there. Once I get up to a split at the top, that's where I'll leave a node on each side, maybe 2 nodes. But as you can see with the willows, they have a much more clustered node setup than your elderberries, and they're alternating as opposed to opposite nodes. So you'll see one on this side of the stem and then one on this side of the stem a little further up. Same thing goes for cutting across the bottom. You'll want a nice flat cut here. You'll go up about 5 or 6 inches, and you're likely to capture anywhere from 5 to 6 nodes because of that compact node structure. Again, cut flat, move up about 5 or 6 inches, give yourself a nice diagonal cut to give you the direction of your nodes. It's a lot more important with your pussy willows because they're harder to see which direction those nodes are facing, depending on the level of your eyesight, that is. But once I get down to this bottom one here, I'll clean that up just a little bit more, and there, hey, 3 perfect stakes for 3 new trees. This one's going to be one that we take some cuttings off of. This is Silky Dogwood, or Cornus amomum. They produce little clusters of berries throughout summer, and they have kind of a bluish sheen to them. They're very beautiful. The birds absolutely love them. They will wipe them clean. So it almost grows in a style similar to the pagoda dogwood, where the branching structure spreads out into almost their own layers, as you can see. But this one I'm excited to get a handful of cuttings off of, and hopefully be able to bring them to everyone in the community. Much like the willows, your dogwoods, as long as you have some plant material, you can stick and stab that into the ground, and you're likely to get it to root as long as there's regular moisture. For this one specifically, I'm again going to target this last year's growth. You can see how red this bark stays up until it starts to get back towards the trunk, where it starts turning into a more tan coloration and that red starts to disappear. So that red area, that's the area I'm going to really focus on for taking my cuttings when it comes to the Silky Dogwood. So I'm back with you. It's the next day after we took those cuttings. Yesterday we ran out of time to be able to finish it up, but that's all right because now today we're ready to go, and I'll show you the rest of the process. After taking my cuttings, I decided to put them all in buckets and fill them with water. This allows those cuts to be able to remain wet and keep from drying out in between when you take your cutting and when you finally put them in your growing medium. For my growing medium, I'm working with a combination of 60% double ground pine fines, or double shredded, and then a mixed hardwood that's shredded once. There will be a couple larger chunks in here that you might have to move out of the way when you're filling your trays, but I found it to be a good combination to hold moisture inside some of that mulch, while at the same time letting enough of it wick away that it doesn't end up with root rot. One thing I want to bring up while we're on the subject of what growing medium I'm using is one of the things that most people take a look at when they're looking at YouTube videos of how to do hardwood cuttings is most often you're working with specialty roses or hydrangeas or more exotic plants that have growing conditions that aren't necessarily similar to what you have in your backyard. So one thing I want you to keep in mind is if you're doing native hardwood cuttings, they are way, way more resilient than you might initially give them credit for. You have a lot more room for error when it comes to working with your native shrubs than you will some of your exotics. That is why when I was talking about the black currants, I explained that you could simply stool mound them by laying down branches, covering them with dirt, and they'll reroot themselves. It's a great technique to use. It just goes to show how resilient some of these plants that we're working with are. So yesterday I ended up getting the elderberry cuttings, the black currants, red dogwood, silky dogwood, and then the pussy willows. Now there's a handful more that I'm after, so over the next couple days I'll be going through and getting those. Things like pagoda dogwood, gray dogwood. There's going to be over the next few days, I'm going to be going ahead and getting cuttings like the gray dogwood, pagoda dogwood, river birches, as well as the wild plums that we have on our property. So there'll be much more in store for me over the next few days. Now that we've taken a look at what plant material to use for our cuttings, how to take those cuttings, how to store the cuttings, and which medium to use, let's move on to the process of actually throwing in some stakes, getting them watered, and storing them in some shade. So the next steps in the process are the easiest. Simply take your cuttings, make sure that you have them oriented in the right way as we talked about before, making sure that node is going upward. Simply take your stake, stick it in your growing medium so that that first node is completely buried. And it's as simple as that. Now, once we are all done putting all of our stakes in, then we're going to take them outside, give them a real good water down. That's going to help the mulch to be able to form around that stake and give it more support as it's rooting in. If you just put it in like this, it's going to end up having a lot of air gaps between the stake and your growing medium, and that's going to make it so that you don't have rooting from those areas. So making sure you get a really nice heavy watering on them your first go around so that they seed in well will really help your propagation. Now that we got all of our stakes made up, it's going to be just as simple as giving them a nice drink. Like I said earlier, just make sure you get them nice and wet. That'll help them set themselves into that medium. Now there's a number of other things you can use as growing mediums, whether that be sand, perlite, even just dirt that you get from home. Once you've thoroughly flooded out your trays to make sure that they're nice and set, you'll notice that some of the gaps or some of the cells will have dirt that needs to be filled back in. That's all right. You're not going to have it on every single one, but there's a little bit of just touch-up work at the end to do to make sure that they're well set. Once I'm done, oh, dude! Oh, cats are the worst sometimes. Yeah, you're so cute, but don't do that. Stay down. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking our trays from here. I guess she's going to be the parrot and ride on my shoulder. Or on my head. This is what I deal with every day. So like I was saying, we're going to take our trays from here. We're going to move them over to the back of the garage. They'll stay nice and shaded back here. We'll be able to keep an eye on them, get a bunch of water to them throughout the next couple months. in about 2 months or so, I'll be able to check our roots, see how we're doing, and at that point, we might transition them back over to this area, which is more dappled sunshine. That'll allow them to get a little bit more UV exposure once they've had a chance to set their roots. And with that, it really is just that easy to be able to multiply some of the native shrubs that you have in your landscape or the community around you. Make sure you get out there during the dormant period before those buds break, but otherwise it's quite as easy as what I showed you. Pick the right plant material, take the appropriate cuts so that you can identify which direction your nodes are going, as well as shed some water from the cutting as it's going through its rooting process. Stick it in a well-drained medium that you flush with water initially to get it well set. And then toss it in a real shady location so that it's protected from the UV during its rooting phase. This will help retain moisture and follow up to make sure that it has routine moisture. Otherwise, they will fail on you. But if you've done those steps, you will be amazed at just how much you can multiply and what you can bring back for native landscaping into your yard. Not only will the birds and insects enjoy it, but so will you, because you'll have that satisfaction of being able to go from a small little cutting to a beautiful shrub that provides for all wildlife around you. So go ahead, take a little time over the next week or two, test out your hand, and see what you can come up with. Thanks for joining us with Three Springs Native Nursery. We'll catch you back here next week. So last week when I was sharing kind of the winter walk around with everyone, I was trying to capture one of the minnows on video. And I decided this time I'd do one better. I'd bring my dip net down and I'd see if I could catch one for us and see if we can figure out what they are. Last year, I did catch some crayfish while I was cleaning out the pond, as well as what's known as a stickleback, which is a type of northern hemisphere scaleless fish that is often found in little fen wetland areas that don't have a lot of competition. So let's see if we can find them in here. Oh, there he is. Get back here. Let's get rid of some of that charcoal. He's a squiggly guy. Did he get out? Oh man. I done lost him. Well, that was disappointing, guys. You win some, you lose some. I guess I'm going to have to search for another one. Just a couple things that are in there. Always something to find in the water. Well, sometimes you get bested by nature. This is one of them. I mucked this thing out pretty bad, so there ain't going to be no finding minnows right now. Hopefully it'll settle down, and then I'll be back at it. Hopefully by the end of the day, we get to know what's in there. Well, no sooner did I turn off that last recording, and I saw a little action. So, we got them this time. Let's try to keep them on the shore. Okay, let's see what we got here. First guy is a little type of water bug. That's what I was targeting. I saw him moving around in the water. Went after him. Let's find these fish. Yeah, I came up with the little water bug, and then the next thing you know, I had two little minnows in the net that I think I saw. This one for sure. Get him cleaned up. Now, these aren't necessarily eaters. They're not the biggest guys in the world. They sure are pretty. Look at that guy. Beautiful stickleback. I don't know if we can get his fins to come out. That's why they're called stickleback, is they have a bunch of fins that pop up. Let's get this guy back in the water. Here's the second little guy I recovered. This beautiful little stickleback. If you build it, they will come. Let's get you back to the water.